Hi there, I'm Hilary Amato at Praise Behavior Services. I'm going to be walking through your Praise Behavior ABA training today. So just to get started, I want to tell you a little bit about Praise. Praise was founded in 2011 as a response to the needs of the Central Coast community's call for highly trained behavioral supports for individuals with disabilities at all stages of life. Today's training is designed for individuals with little or no experience with ABA. The goal for this training is that at the conclusion of the training, the participants will have a good basic knowledge of what ABA is, what the tools are, the logic of the system, and the ability to read and implement an ABA procedure. Please take notes during this training. Feel free to reach out, email us, let us know if you have any questions. Please be sure that you have printed and you will be filling out the accompanying worksheets during this training. Don't think that ABA is so complicated that you can't sort it out. We are kind of compacting the whole breadth and width of ABA into a few short hours. This is typically a 4-year course, but we're going to bring you the highlights. One thing I want to let you know is that in ABA we are mandated reporters. Please talk to your supervisor if you have any questions about that. So just to get us started, I just want to explain that ABA is a science. It's not an approach or anything like that. It's a natural science. It is the application of the scientific study of behavior to human populations. And I know it seems like what we do is purely volitional, but there are laws that govern all behavior. Behavioral is lawful. So some of the primary goals of ABA are to identify variables controlling that behavior so that behavior can be predicted and changed if it is socially significant to do so. ABA, this field extends to a lot of different areas, the study of safety, animal psychology, behavioral psychology, gambling psychology, among many other things. I have used it before in Brazil to teach English as a second language. So to start us off, our first module is going to be about the A-B-C contingency. So in this module here, we're going to learn how to pinpoint a behavior of interest, what an antecedent is, how to find that antecedent, and finally, how to change a target behavior by changing the antecedent. Okay, so let's start off by taking a look at behavior. Behavior is everything an organism does. It's defined as any muscular, glandular, or neural electrical behavior or activity. All our thoughts and our actions are behavior. So even things like sweating, your heart pounding, and when your tummy does flips, those are all behavior. So a useful way to determine what is and isn't a behavior is by using the dead man's test. So basically, if a dead man can do it, it isn't behavior. So if a dead man can't do it, then it is behavior. So it's kind of the opposite. You have to think of the opposite when you use the dead man's test, okay? So let's just compare. So on a very windy day, you get knocked down by a gust of wind. Being knocked over by a gust of wind is not behavior because a dead man could also be knocked over by a strong gust of wind. However, like if you tuck and roll and you show whoa as you're being blown over by that wind, this is a behavior because a dead man cannot tuck, roll, or vocalize something. So try to think about the volition there. Um, Here's another example. So Johnny's running around the cafeteria, he's disrupting his peers. So sometimes we try to put a positive spin on things and we'll just say, I'd really like him to just sit quietly. And although that might be what you want to happen, this will confuse your intervention. So what you're really wanting here is for Johnny to stop running around and stop disrupting his peers. The intervention needs to then focus on running and disrupting. Dead men are very good at sitting quietly. So again, what is the behavior here? And here's one more example. It's getting fun, right? So Sally needs to wear her glasses per doctor's recommendation, but she doesn't like wearing them and she takes them off. So you might be thinking, I just want her to wear her glasses. Should you intervene on her wearing her glasses? No, because dead men are very good at wearing glasses. You want to look at the component involving action here. So taking glasses off and putting glasses on would be excellent targets to start intervening on here. So let me give you some examples of behavior. Walking, jumping, talking, asking questions, remaining seated, on the other hand, is not a behavior. Some other non-examples would be wearing clothes, staying quiet, and not hitting. Again, a dead man can very easily stay seated, wear clothes, and stay quiet. So we need to think about what the opposite of these things are. So behavior occurs because it produces specific outcomes. It is often out of our awareness even. People exhibit behaviors that have a history of meeting certain needs. So for example, when Susie cries, her mom gives her a hug. So that behavior of crying produces that outcome of getting a hug. So one really important thing that I need to remind everybody, and I need to remind myself even sometimes, is don't take behavior personally. Our individuals and ourselves, we exhibit behavior because it has worked for us in the past. And what we need to change is those environmental variables so that behavior stops working and more adaptable behaviors start working. So why does this matters? Why does this matter? Basically, in behavior analysis, the A-B-C contingency is used constantly. It helps us to understand why a particular behavior is occurring and what we can do to increase or decrease that behavior. So let's take a look here. So to understand behavior, it's important to look at what happens before and after the behavior. Or a different way to say that would be, I need to look at the antecedent and the consequence of that behavior. So that ABC contingency is an easy way to break it down. We have the antecedent, behavior, consequence. Antecedent, you see that red light. Behavior is hitting the brakes, and the consequence is you're safe there at the traffic light instead of a target for oncoming traffic. Anytime behavior texts bring situations to me, today in my session, Johnny hit me. And that can be a stressful situation. But what I need to be able to support you there is I need to look at what happened before the behavior and what happened after the behavior so we can find a consequence. So we can find a behavioral contingency that is going to keep that behavior from happening in the future. Okay. That three-term contingency, again, is the antecedent or the trigger, the behavior we might call a response, and the result or the consequence. So the antecedent is the variable that makes up the environment in which behavior takes place. So this could be people, activities, or objects. The behavior itself, which is the action of the individual, and the consequence, which will determine the future frequency of that behavior. So let's look at some examples here. Here's an ABC contingency. Laura doesn't have a cookie. She asks for a cookie and she still doesn't have a cookie. That's what we would call extinction. And that means we didn't reinforce her behavior. So that behavior of asking for a cookie is going to decrease. But when you look at another contingency, so Laura doesn't have cookies, she hits her mom, and now Laura has cookies. That is something we call reinforcement, and we're going to see that behavior increase in the future. And that can be a really sticky situation when you have individuals exhibiting adaptive behaviors, and those behaviors are not reinforced. They are diminished, they are suppressed, and on the other hand, their maladaptive behaviors are reinforced and encouraged. So those are things we pay attention to in ABA and try to prevent from happening. So I'm going to have everyone get out their worksheets. We have a question. This is question number 1 from module 1. In the introduction module of the training, we learned what a behavior is. Let's see how much you remember. True or false? Behavior is any movement involving an organism. I'm going to give you a couple seconds to answer that. Feel free to pause if you need to. Okay, I'm going to move on. Please answer that on your worksheet and pause if you need to. Just to recap here, can you think of any movement that does not pass the dead man's test? And if you want to pause and think of an example, that would be great. Would the wind blowing through your hair be a behavior? Can a dead man's hair blow in the wind? Yes, a dead man's hair can blow in the wind, so no, this is not a behavior. Okay, remember, again, there are three necessary components to select a target behavior. One, you have to have the ability to be measured. It needs to be measurable. Two, it must involve movement. And three, it must be able to be seen. It must be observable. So if you can check all three of these things, you're going to be able to start working with the target behavior. So for example, when I touch my nose here, can I measure that? 1, 2, 3. Yes, I can. Um, does it involve movement? Yes, it does. Can people see that I'm doing that? Yes, they absolutely can. So that would be a good target behavior to look at. Okay, please get out your worksheets again. We're going to take a look at question 2. Um, again, answer this on your worksheet. Let's see how much you remember. True or false, a behavior involves the actions of all objects. Take a second and answer that. Pause if you need to. I'm going to give you a couple seconds. I'm just going to move on here. If you need to pause, no problem. Let's test some more of your skills. I'm going to answer these. These aren't on your worksheet. We're going to answer these on the next slides, but just take a look and see if you can figure it out by yourself. Just say yes or no and tell us why. Is this a behavior? Is a spider spinning a web a behavior? How about a child resting? And what about a heart beating? Is that a behavior? Let's take a look at the answers here. Is a spider spinning a web a behavior? It totally is. We see behavior exhibited by all living organisms. How about a child resting? No, resting, it doesn't pass the dead man's test, okay? What about a heart beating? Yes. Heart beating can be seen with the use of imaging, right? So we can get that beats per, we can get the number of beats per minute, we can get that frequency, and then that pumping of blood involves movement. So for sure, that is a behavior. Okay, what about non-compliance? This is a tricky one here. Um, again, we need to think about if it can be measured. Can we measure the amount of times that he didn't make his bed? Does non-compliance involve movement? Remember, we have to have behavior that involves movement. If I ask him to go make his bed, if I ask my son to go make his bed and he just sits on the couch, kind of doesn't involve movement, right? And is it able to be seen? Can we see that someone is not complying? Again, think about the dead man's test. Can a dead man be non-compliant? Yes, I can ask a dead man to go clean his room and he will not go clean his room. So in fact, non-compliance is not truly a behavior, okay? Let's take a look at behavior and non-compliance here. In behavior analysis, it's important to focus on compliance rather than non-compliance. So what do we want to increase here? Compliance with morning routines, compliance with completing tasks given. So if we know what we are dealing with, we can better support clients and families. Whether or not we would talk about non-compliance in regards to adults we support might be another issue altogether. Okay, so let's move on. Let's talk about antecedents here. So an antecedent is an environmental condition or stimulus change that exists or occurs before the behavior of interest. They are important because they play a critical part in learning and motivation. Antecedents affect the behavior or the person performing the behavior, whether they know them or they want them to or not. Antecedents occur in someone's environment and the behavior cannot be the antecedent. So let's take a look at stimulus changes. Let's look at the definition of an antecedent again. An antecedent is an environmental condition or stimulus change that exists or occurs before the behavior of interest. So now that we understand the environmental condition, the environmental part of this definition, let's move on to a stimulus change. To understand a stimulus change, it's important to understand what a stimulus is. A stimulus is a change in the environment which can affect the behavior. So objects themselves, this pen, this is not a stimulus in ABA. They are part of the environment. However, if an object is moved, this movement of the object is a stimulus change. So, for example, a pen can't be a stimulus, but someone presenting you with a pen can be a stimulus. And this is because a person presenting you with a pen is a change in your environment. Okay. So, for example, Alex's mom asks you to put his shoes on. Alex starts kicking and screaming, so his mom picks him up. Alex is the behavior, the person performing the behavior. So first, let's find that behavior. What's that behavior? I want you to think about this at home. It's not on the worksheet, but just think about it. What is the behavior here? And what happened before Alex began kicking and screaming? And what if Alex hadn't been asked to put his shoes on? Take a second and think about it. So what was the behavior? The behavior was that kicking and screaming. What happened before he began kicking and screaming? His mom asked him to put his shoes on. So this would be what we call the antecedent. What if Alex hadn't been asked to put his shoes on? Well, it's very unlikely that he would have started kicking and screaming to begin with. That antecedent caused that behavior change there. Let's take a look at another example. Sophia was sitting outside and started laughing when she saw a cat chasing a dog. Sophia, again, is the behavior. So first question, what was the behavior here? And what is the antecedent? Just don't worry about your worksheets. This is just a question I'm asking. Okay, so what was the behavior here? That behavior was laughing. Okay, what was the antecedent? The antecedent was her seeing a cat chasing a dog. This was the antecedent. So as you can see, what we do is highly influenced by environment, whether it be a positive or negative change. Okay. So here are some more examples. When you're driving and you see a traffic light turning from green to red, and you press the brake, that behavior is braking, hitting the brake. The antecedent would be that light change to red. If you go outside on a cold day and you put on a jacket, that behavior would be putting on your jacket, and the antecedent would be the cold weather there. Okay, so let's take a look. There are a few different kinds of antecedent variables. We have something that's called the discriminative stimulus, and this is a stimulus event or condition in which the presence of which a particular behavior will be reinforced or punished. Okay. A motivating operation is a procedure or condition that temporarily alters learning or performance in respect to a particular reinforcer or aversive condition. In ABA, we can't really say, I haven't had anything sweet all day, so I want cookies more, so I'll look for cookies more at the end of the day. We don't usually use terms like want or need. We use terms like motivating operation, okay? But it's the same idea. The before condition, this refers simply to the state of opposites between the environment before the behavior occurred and after the behavior occurs. Okay, so let's kind of deep dive into some of these concepts here. What is the discriminative stimulus again? Okay, so again, the discriminative stimulus, or SD, signals that reinforcement is available. This is learned through past experiences. So for example, when Joe is in class and his teacher is at her desk, he knows he can ask her for help with his classwork. But when he's in class and his teacher is speaking with another student at that student's desk, he knows he has to wait before he can get help with his homework. So the SD is learned through past experience, SD of the teacher being at the teacher's desk, and the other situation where the teacher is not at the teacher's desk. She's helping another student. So in the past, when Joe's teacher has been at her desk, she was able to help him with his work. She was available. But when she was with another student, he had to wait. So Joe's teacher at his desk is the SD for him being able to ask for help with his work. Her being at another student's desk is a stimulus that tells him he will not receive reinforcement if he asks for help at this moment. So your turn here. Again, this one is not on the worksheet, just a question I'm asking here, but let's just say, for example, you walk into a coffee shop and you see the barista at the register and you order your coffee. So what was the discriminative stimulus for ordering coffee? Well, we have A, the site of the coffee shop, B, the barista at the register, or C, receiving your coffee order. What do you guys think here? Let's take a look here. It was that SD, or that signal that reinforcement was available of seeing the barista at the register. If no one was there, you wouldn't start ordering. You'd wait for the barista to come to the register to take your order, correct? So when we talk about those SD or discriminative stimuli, what does that affect? SDs affect the availability of a reinforcer and they evoke behavior, meaning they cause behavior to happen. So seeing that barista at the register, we know that ordering at the register will be reinforced. It evokes our behavior of walking up there and ordering it. Let's talk for a second here about motivation. Certain situations make some outcomes more valuable than others. So for example, hunger. If you're hungry for a piece of cake, if you're hungry, a piece of cake would be valuable. If you're full, a piece of cake would not be valuable. With thirst, if you're thirsty, a drink would be very valuable. If you just had a large glass of water, a drink would not be very valuable at that moment. So if something is valuable, you're more likely to engage in the behavior that has worked in the past to get it. So let's think about the behaviors involved there. Again, if you're thirsty, you're likely to get up and pour yourself a glass of water. If you're not thirsty, you're not likely to get up and pour a glass of water. Depending on what we know is valuable to someone at that time, we can predict their behavior. So if you have a client who usually gets hungry about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you know that his behavior of possibly asking for something to eat might increase around 4. Right? So here's some other examples with motivation. Things that are motivating don't always have to be need-based, like hunger or thirst. Motivation can be simple or complicated. So here's some examples with simple motivation. If you have an itch, you're more motivated to scratch it. If you're tired, you're motivated to sleep. How about some examples of complicated motivation? Motivation from working often comes from the paycheck that we receive at the end, and we have to wait, a couple of weeks to receive that paycheck, right? Motivation for a child finishing all their homework can come from television time that will come when they have access to that when they are finished. And again, that takes a lot more time than simply scratching an itch. A little more complicated there. Again, I want to return to this concept of a child wanting to answer. For those of us who work with ABA, want isn't really a term we use. It is simply because wanting something is not an observable or measurable behavior. So pushing past someone to grab a cookie, that's observable and measurable. Saying car when you're shown a picture of a car, and then laughing hysterically when the tech tickles you while saying, "Nice job naming car." Those things are observable and they are measurable. Wanting something, wanting tickles is not observable or measurable. Okay. Wanting is a phenomenon that in ABA we explain in terms of motivating operations. So when we want something, it means that that item has a high reinforcing value at that moment due to a relevant MO, motivating operation. As a result, behaviors that may have been previously reinforced with that item have a higher chance of occurring at that time. Okay, so in summary, motivating operations are essential components In behavior analysis, motivating operations affect the reinforcing properties of consequences and consequently, the frequency of behavior. So understanding this concept is crucial for understanding and modifying human behavior. But why does this matter? The most important thing in ABA is to keep our learners motivated to learn. If they aren't chilled out, happy, and paying attention, they aren't in a good place to learn. We'll see that decreased learning opportunities and increased problem behaviors when our learners are not motivated. Here are some conditions associated with challenging behavior. Important to remember, people come with a history. It's not possible for us to assume behavior by looking at somebody. We don't know how someone will be affected by a situation that may arise. And there are two common conditions we see regularly, and those include physical handicaps and mental illness. Okay, so let's look at physical handicaps. So for example, Mary's 28 years old and recently she was in a car accident. Right now she's confined to a wheelchair and has an undetermined amount of time during her slow recovery. So put yourself here in Mary's shoes. If you lost the ability to walk, what other things would you be losing? You'd lose the ability to drive, ability to run up the stairs when you're running late. Can you imagine how frustrating that would be? How do you think that frustration might surface through anger, depression, aggression, possibly? So now, what if an individual was born with physical handicaps? They don't know any different. So it's not an issue, right? I'd like you to put yourself in their shoes, put yourself in a room full of like athletes, models, or doctors for a second. Now, some people might be saying like, "Oh my gosh, these people are amazing. I want to hang out with them." Others might be thinking differently, like, "Why can't I look like her? Why can't I run as fast as him? Why are they so much better than me?" So, as you can see, physical handicaps can have a huge impact on behavior. Let's talk about mental illness here. So understanding conditions associated with the diagnosis affects how we may go about supporting our individual. So for example, like let's say that you are working with a 92-year-old man who has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. So how helpful would it be to constantly be attempting to teach him to memorize the lyrics of a song? Probably not very. Um, what about a 34-year-old woman who has the mental capabilities of a 5-year-old? Would it be appropriate to watch an R-rated movie with her? Not usually. Both physical and mental handicaps equally create motivation for potential problem behaviors. So it is important to be aware of these conditions at all times as they shape the way we interact on a daily basis with the people we serve. So it's important to remember that we are not trying to fix someone that you're serving. Our job is to continue to give them the support that they need in order for them to be the best they can be. So we're going to do the Module 1 review. Again, please answer these questions on your worksheets. Get your worksheets out right now. Again, if you need to pause the video, slow down a little bit here, please feel free to do so. This is question 3 because we've already seen questions 1 and 2 over the course of this module. What does the A-B-C contingency stand for? I'm going on to question 4 here. What is behavior? Give me the definition. Okay, if you need more time, just pause it. Here's question 5. What is an antecedent? Question 6 here. What is the SD? Question 7. What does the SD affect? Question 8. What is the MO or motivating operation? Question 9, what does the MO or motivating operation affect? That's it. You have completed Module 1. Thank you so much for your attention. Hi there, this is Hillary again. Let's get started on Module 2 of the Praise ABA service training. We're going to be looking here at behavior and consequences. And so just to give you an overview of Module 2, in the previous module, we focused on how what happens before a behavior influences that behavior. This module will focus on what happens after the behavior and how we can increase or decrease behavior with consequences. Again, that A-B-C contingency is the A, antecedent, B, behavior or response, and C, consequence of that behavior. Here we're going to be taking a look at consequence conditions. So what is a consequence exactly? Usually when you hear the word consequence, you think of something negative, but in ABA, this is not the correct definition. A consequence is a stimulus change that follows the behavior of interest. So some consequences, especially those that are immediate and relevant to what someone wants at the moment, have an influence on future behavior. Consequences can include reinforcement, punishment, penalty, and escape. Consequences occur within someone's environment, so the behavior cannot be the consequence. Reinforcement is a type of consequence that immediately follows a response that increases the future frequency of that behavior. So if it doesn't increase in frequency, it is not reinforcement. Positive and negative reinforcement are two types of reinforcement. Positive as when something you want is added. Negative reinforcement is when something you don't want is taken away. Another name for this is escape. You're escaping something aversive. So watch out. Many people mistakenly think that positive and negative here would be like good and bad, but don't fall into that trap. It's more like math. When we talk about positive reinforcement, we're adding something to the environment. When it's negative reinforcement, we're removing something aversive, and we're removing something you don't want. So taking a look at our three-term contingency for positive reinforcement, in the A or antecedent condition, the individual doesn't have a reinforcer. In the B or behavior condition, the individual engages in a behavior, and then the C, the consequence condition, the individual has a reinforcer. They don't have a reinforcer, they perform the behavior, they have that reinforcer. Let's take a look at an example of reinforcement. Positive reinforcement, an example would be whenever Katie asks for a piece of candy, she gets a piece of candy. Positive, math, addition of the candy is added. And it's reinforcement because asking for candy is likely to increase in the future since it was effective in getting candy today. Negative reinforcement, again, we're removing something, we're subtracting something aversive. So whenever Julie's baby is picked up, that baby stops crying. So it's negative because that aversive stimulus of the crying that is removed. And it's reinforcement because picking up the baby, it's likely to increase in the future since it was effective in stopping that crying. So here's an example. Whenever Renee receives an answer or answers an answer correctly in class, her teacher gives her verbal praise. That consequence is that praise is added. Why is this reinforcement? That consequence of praise makes the behavior of answering questions correctly in class more likely to occur in the future. When Jake screams and hits his staff person, everyone in the room pays attention to him. The consequence, attention is added. So be careful about this. We don't want to reinforce behavior like this. Why is this reinforcement? That consequence of attention makes the behavior of screaming and hitting that staff person more likely to occur in the future. Here's another example of positive reinforcement. When Katie asks politely for candy, her mother gives her candy. So that consequence, candy is added. Why is this reinforcement? The consequence of candy makes the behavior of politely asking for candy more likely to occur in the future. Again, positive reinforcement, it's usually just referred to as reinforcement. It's the most well-known of these contingencies. Um, Please get out your worksheets. This question will be question number 1 from module 2 on your worksheet. So I'm just going to ask you here to give an original example of positive reinforcement. I want you to give the antecedent, behavior, and consequence. And I gave one example here. Basically, the standard procedure, an individual doesn't have a reinforcer, they engage in the behavior, they have a reinforcer. Give you a few seconds here to write something down. Pause the video if you need to. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about negative reinforcement. This is the one most people confuse with punishment. But here, the contingency is there's an aversive stimulus in the environment. The individual performs a behavior and that aversive stimulus is removed. Again, remember my example with the baby. The baby is crying. Julie picks up the baby. The baby stops crying. So that aversive stimulus of the crying is removed. And we are going to, reinforcement is all about increasing that behavior. So that behavior of picking up the baby is going to increase in the future. Okay. So here's an example of negative reinforcement. When Jane's alarm goes off in the morning, that noise is very unpleasant. I hate that sound. She wakes up, she shuts it off so she doesn't have to hear it anymore. So that consequence, the noise of the alarm being taken away, that is going to increase in the future. When we talk about reinforcement, we're talking about increasing behavior. Why is this reinforcement? That consequence of the removal of the alarm makes the behavior of getting up to shut it off more likely in the future. Okay. Another example, when Jake screams and hits his staff person, he doesn't have to do chores. So that consequence of having to do chores is removed. We took away something aversive. So watch out for contingencies like that. Why is this reinforcement? The consequence of no chores makes the behavior of screaming and hitting a staff person more likely to occur in the future. Okay. Whenever Kate's toddler screams and cries in the store, she gives her toddler candy in order to calm her down and no longer have to hear those screams and cries. So the consequence is the screaming and crying are taken away. Be careful, watch out when you reinforce behavior like this. Why is this reinforcement? The consequence of removing the screaming and crying makes the behavior of giving candy to a screaming and crying child in the future more likely to increase. So we're gonna kind of reinforce that screaming and crying there. Negative reinforcement is often referred to as escape. And why is that? That is because you're trying to escape something that is aversive, something that you don't like. Now, in a couple seconds here, I'm going to ask you to give me an example of negative reinforcement on your worksheet. But I know a lot of people confuse what negative reinforcement is. They think it's something bad, that we're decreasing behavior. Again, that's not the truth. We're escaping something aversive, and we will increase that behavior in the future. I'm just going to give you an extra example to try to get your the juices flowing for thinking of an example of negative reinforcement. So, well, if negative reinforcement is escape, think of reinforcing a problem behavior. Now, of course, when you start working with your kiddos here at Praise, we don't want you to reinforce problem behavior. But what I'm about to ask you to do is give an example of negative reinforcement. So try to think of examples based on this and then do the opposite with our kiddos, okay? So for example, dad is trying to work, kids are screaming. So I got to get this work done. Dad gives them tablets. Unfortunately, he did take away that aversive stimulus of the kids screaming, but this is a great incentive to scream around the house at work time next time, okay? So he is reinforcing that behavior of screaming. Another example here, Johnny is yelling at his mom because he has to clean his room. Mom reprimands him, but tells him to get out while she cleans his room. How many of us have seen this contingency before? Ah, I'm done with you yelling. Get out of here. I'm going to clean your room, but we're going to talk about this later. So he plays video games while mom cleans his room. So she's reinforced that behavior. But she has stopped his yelling. So she has escaped from that aversive stimulus of him yelling. And this is unfortunately going to increase his behavior of yelling next time he has to clean his room. Okay. Please get out your worksheets. This is on your worksheets. I'm going to have you give me an original example of escape behavior. So this is negative reinforcement. Again, that contingency is the antecedent behavior consequence. The basic contingency would be in the antecedent condition, there's an aversive stimulus in the environment. In the behavior condition, the individual performs the behavior, and the consequence, that aversive stimulus is removed. We escape that aversive stimulus or avoid it. I'll give you a couple seconds here and then we'll move on. Pause the video if you need. Okay, now we're going to take a look at punishment. So punishment here is a type of consequence that immediately follows a response that decreases the future frequency of that behavior. Let's just stop here. Let's review our four basic contingencies, okay? When we talk about positive reinforcement, we're talking about increasing behavior. We add a reinforcer here. Okay, and that behavior will increase. With punishment, with positive punishment, you are adding an aversive condition, and your goal, and what happens is that behavior decreases. Okay, with negative punishment, we are removing a reinforcer. We're taking that kid's toy away when he hits his brother. And what we're doing here is we are decreasing behavior. And with negative reinforcement, we are removing an aversive stimulus and we are increasing behavior. So those are the four basic contingencies, just to give you an overview. But as mentioned in the previous slide, and as with reinforcement, there are also two types of punishment. When we have positive punishment, again, positive here does not mean that it's good. It means we're adding something, in this case, aversive. Positive punishment is when something you don't want is added. Negative punishment is when something you do want is taken away. And this is also called a penalty. So you're put in timeout from free time, your bunny is taken away, your cell phone is taken away. Oh no. These are our two basic contingencies aimed at decreasing behavior. Just want to mention here that the use of punishment is not recommended to support our clients. However, it is very important to understand these contingencies to understand how to avoid using punishment. Okay, so our basic contingency with positive punishment, again, positive not in the sense of good, but in the sense of mathematics, we are adding something to the environment. Here's our standard contingency. In the antecedent condition, there's no aversive stimulus in the environment. And then the behavior condition, the individual engages in a behavior, and the consequence, that aversive stimulus is added based on that behavior. Okay, just like, when you go to answer a question on a quiz and it buzzes at you when you get the wrong answer. It is punishment meant to decrease that behavior of giving the wrong answer. Okay, so with positive punishment, here's an example. Zach's cooking and he put his hand on the handle of a pot without an oven mitt. That burned his hand, so that it's positive, not in the sense of good, but in the sense of we are adding that pain, well, not us, but the pan added that pain to Zach's hand. The punishment, it is punishment because touching hot pans without an oven mitt will decrease in the future since Zach experienced pain when touching it. Okay. When Jack is running late for school, his mom yells. The consequence, yelling is added. Why is this punishment? The consequence of yelling makes the running late less likely to occur in the future. When Mark skips over reading the questions on his tasks and marks random answers, he gets an F. So the consequence, that poor grade is added. So why is this a punishment? That consequence, the poor grade, makes marking random answers without reading the questions less likely to occur in the future. Here's another example of positive punishment. When Lacey throws a tantrum, her dad has her do an extra chore once she is calm. So the consequence is that chore is added. So why is this punishment? That consequence of the chore makes the tantrum less likely to happen in the future. Just a note here, positive punishment does not mean abuse, hitting, etc. It means that something is added in the environment to make the behavior less likely to occur in the future. This is an official ABA term, the word punishment, and it's not the same thing as that traditional definition of the word punishment. A note here, positive punishment is often just called punishment, okay? All right. Get out your worksheets again here. Please answer this on your worksheet. Please give me an original example of punishment, in this case, positive punishment. Antecedent behavior consequence. Again, that standard example, there's no aversive stimulus in the environment. The individual engages in a behavior and that aversive stimulus is added. I'm going to give you a few seconds and then pause the video if you need more time. All right, let's move on. Now we're going to be talking about negative punishment. And the standard contingency here with negative punishment is that there is a reinforcer in the environment, the individual engages in a behavior, and that reinforcer is taken away. Okay, so a kid has a bunny, he hits his friend, and then mom takes that bunny and puts the bunny in timeout. Okay. Here's an example here of negative punishment. Again, negative, we're taking something away. Molly is coloring with permanent markers. When she decided coloring on the wall would be more fun than paper, her mom takes the permanent markers away. It was negative because her markers are removed, and it's punishment because Molly's drawing on the wall will decrease in the future since she was no longer allowed to color after drawing on the wall. So when Katie screams or cries, her mom takes away one of her toys. The consequence is that that toy was taken away. And why is this punishment? That consequence of losing the toy makes screaming and crying less likely to occur in the future. When Chelsea hits her friends, they don't want to play with her anymore. It happens pretty natural in our environment, right? That consequence, Chelsea's friends were taken away. And why is this a punishment? That consequence of losing friends makes hitting her friends less likely to happen in the future. Okay, one more example here. When James hits his staff person, he loses tokens. So the consequence is those tokens are taken away. Why is this a punishment? The consequence of losing tokens makes hitting staff less likely to occur in the future. Negative punishment is often simply referred to as a penalty. They lose something there. So when is a penalty effective? When used correctly, a penalty can be effective in the following ways. When the consequences are naturally occurring. So for example, when Katie hits her friends, they don't want to play with her anymore. So if that consequence of hitting her friends is that they don't want to play with her, Katie would like to play with her friends, then the friends will leave when seeing the behavior, and that behavior won't work. Here's another example. When Ryan is caught stealing a candy bar, the candy bar is taken away. So Ryan stole the candy bar because he wanted to eat it. So taking the candy bar away makes this behavior less likely to occur in the future because stealing the candy bar to eat it didn't work. So you need to make sure that the punishment is related to the challenging behavior. Okay, please get out your worksheets. We're going to answer question number 4 from module 2 here. So please give an original example of a penalty or of negative reinforcement. Give me the antecedent behavior and consequence. Again, that standard contingency is that there's a reinforcer in the environment. The individual engages in behavior and that reinforcer is taken away. I'm going to give you a few seconds here. Please pause the video if you need. Okay, moving on. Here are some things to think about when punishment isn't effective, when a penalty isn't related to the challenging behavior. So, for example, when James steals at day program, he can't sit with his housemates at dinner. So, the challenging behavior and the consequence don't have anything to do with one another here. That loss of a privilege is unrelated to the challenging behavior, and this could cause even more acting out behavior. So, really, really important thing for you to observe when these things happen in the environment. Punishment also wouldn't be very effective when the penalty doesn't affect the challenging behavior. So, for example, if Ryan steals a candy bar and has to pay the person he stole from back, but he still gets to keep or eat the candy bar. So, what's the problem here? Well, since Ryan stole the candy bar to eat it, if he gets to eat it, even if something else is taken away, it will not be an effective punishment for the challenging behavior. Also, punishment won't be effective when the thing that is taken is something that had been previously earned for behavior that is targeted for increase, taking away a reward. This drives me crazy. So, for example, Elijah successfully had no challenging behavior for 30 days and he earned a trip to a water park. Then he acts out and he can't go on the trip anymore. This kills me. So, taking away something that he had earned, that he had worked really hard to earn, can send the message that he is no longer being rewarded for it. It's important to make sure that the behavior that we want to increase is still being rewarded, and only the challenging behavior is being punished. Okay. So, what maintains the challenging behavior? Challenging behavior is maintained because it accomplishes something for the person who engages in it. So, figuring out what the challenging behavior is being used to accomplish can often be that key to changing that behavior. Now, we're going to go into what the four functions of behavior are. And it's really important for you to know that, if you've heard of B.F. Skinner, he proved scientifically that there are four reasons that our behavior happens, and those are called the functions of behavior. Okay. And he found that challenging behaviors are maintained by one or more of these four functions: escape, attention, access, and sensory stimulation or automatic stimulation. Okay, let's start off by talking about escape-related behavior. So lots of times challenging behaviors occur in order to escape or get out of something. So for example, staff asks Janet to do her laundry. She screams and she throws things. Staff end up doing her laundry for her since she is screaming and throwing things. Her behavior here is maintained by escape from doing laundry. Try to be really conscious about that kind of contingency that's just kind of feeding behavior. So here's another example. Marcus needs to do his math assignment. He starts talking and telling jokes during class. So he is sent to the office and now he doesn't have to finish that aversive math assignment. So be really careful about reinforcing problem behavior. We have reinforced his behavior here. What would have been a better way to deal with this? Well, one thing we could have done was when he started telling those jokes and talking during class, we could have him sit in the hall with the assistant teacher to finish the assignment. Here's a pro tip though. You can also try having Marcus work for a reward for working silently on his assignments, but you want to make sure that you talk to him before class next time and define this in workable terms. You don't want to offer him this option when he starts disrupting class. You want to make sure that you make this deal with him beforehand. Another reason challenging behavior occurs is for attention. So, for example, when Kate's mom is talking to Kate's sister, Kate lays on the floor and cries until her mom comes over and starts paying attention to her. So, here, Kate's challenging behavior is maintained by her mother's attention. Okay. Again, here's an example when you don't match the treatment to the function of the behavior. No one's paying attention to Nicholas. Nicholas pulls his mom's hair, and now everyone's yelling at him, and they are paying attention to Nicholas. And yeah, sometimes even, um, you know, negative attention can maintain a problem behavior if that child didn't have a different way to obtain attention in a more positive way. What it would happen if we match the treatment to the function? No one's paying attention to him, pulls mom's hair, mom blocks Nicholas's hand, and she ignores him. Here we have not reinforced Nicholas's behavior. Here's a pro tip though. Do better than just blocking it. Teach Nicholas to tap on people's shoulders or ask them to pay attention to him. Could he ask a question? Another reason challenging behavior occurs is for access. So think of that grocery store example. We all have seen this, haven't we? We all have done this, haven't we? So, for example, if Rebecca has a tantrum while she's grocery shopping with her dad, he'll give her some candy to stop that tantrum. So, Rebecca's tantrum is maintained by access to candy. In this example, here is an example again when you don't match the treatment to the function. So at the toy store, Lily doesn't have a new toy. She screams and kicks her mom. Now, Lily's mom buys her a new toy while telling her that she's going to be sitting in the corner at home. Unfortunately, here we have reinforced Lily's behavior. So what would have been a better way to deal with this? Well, when she started kicking and screaming her mom at that toy store, mom could block those kicks and not buy Lily a new toy. It's really important here. We have not reinforced Lily's maladaptive behavior. Here's a pro tip though. Before going to a mall or a toy store, establish with the child beforehand if they're going to get a toy or not. You can do this with a visual schedule for our nonverbal kiddos, but when possible, have the child agree to the terms before entering the location. Sometimes it's fair to buy a new toy at the toy store, but sometimes it's not. So just be sure to define those terms. Another reason challenging behavior occurs is when it's self-stimulatory for the person engaging in the behavior. Self-stimulatory behavior is the repetition of movements, sounds, or words, or the repetitive movement of objects. And honestly, just us like playing with our hair is self-stimulatory behavior. I'm going to give you an example here. So Chris flaps his hands and there's no antecedent. His hand flapping is maintained by that self-stimulatory sensation, that feeling. The same thing when we play with our hair, when we, bite our nails. Okay. So what happens when we don't match the treatment to the function? Here's an example. Monica has no sensory stimulation. She flaps her hands. Now she has that sensory stimulation while her mom tells her that she shouldn't flap her hands. So you can say whatever you want, but it's reinforced just by the action itself. So what would have been a better way to deal with this? Well, she has no sensory stimulation in a situation where sitting, waiting at the doctor's office, for example, mom knows this could cause the need for sensory stimulation for Monica. So great moment to offer her a fidget toy. We're matching that treatment to the function. So she has that sensory stimulation while performing an action that's a little more socially acceptable. And here, Monica's positive behavior is being reinforced, but not the problem behavior. Here's a pro tip though, with sensory behavior, try to identify another more adaptive behavior, which would occupy the learner in place of that problem behavior. I'm going to give you some examples of self-stimulatory behaviors that we commonly see with our kiddos and with ourselves. Sometimes hand wringing, hand flapping, rocking back and forth, excessive blinking, repeating noises or words, spinning objects. Here are also some common behavioral excesses just in general that we might see. We might see verbal aggression with yelling, screaming, name calling, threatening. We might see physical aggression with hitting, kicking, spitting, or biting. We might see property destruction, breaking or destroying items that don't belong to the person, or sometimes that do. We might see elopement, which means leaving the designated area. And we might see self-injurious behavior, or SIB, such as headbanging, biting self, pulling one's own hair. And we might see pica, which would be the eating of non-food items. We're going to go ahead and do our review for Module 2. Please get out your worksheets again here. If you need to pause the video to get through any of this, that's fine. Just please feel free to do so. So starting off, we already asked questions 1 through 4 during this video. Taking a look here at question 5, what is the consequence? Question 6, does reinforcement increase or decrease future frequencies of behavior? Question 7, does punishment increase or decrease future frequencies of behavior? Question 8, does penalty increase or decrease future frequencies of behavior? Question 9, does escape increase or decrease future frequencies of behavior? Escape again is negative reinforcement. In question 10, what are the 4 functions of behavior? Questions 11 through 14, you're going to want to spend a little more time on. Please feel free to pause the video if needed. Please give an original example of each of the following. I want an example of access maintained behavior, escape maintained behavior, attention maintained behavior, and self-stimulatory behavior. You have now completed Module 2. Thank you for your attention, and we'll see you in Module 3. Okay, let's take a look at Module 3, which is about changing behavior by changing the outcome. So here, this module will begin with a quick recap of the A-B-C contingency. We'll be focusing on how to use that A-B-C contingency to get the outcome we are looking for with the people we serve. We'll also discuss potential difficulties that may arise along the way and how to manage these difficulties. Behavior is affected by what happens before it, the antecedent, and by what happens after it, the consequence. We have that A-B-C antecedent behavior consequence contingency. In this module, we'll be focusing on how behavior can be affected by what happens after it, or the consequence. Consequences are what happens after a behavior and have an impact on whether or not that behavior is likely to occur again or not. As a review, the different types of consequences are positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. Another word for consequence is outcome. One important thing to remember when choosing a strategy for diminishing behavior is that there are many disadvantages for using punishment. It's actually been scientifically shown that using punishment to combat problem behavior, the behavior can return or be substituted for an equally bad or worse behavior. Children basically learn, don't get caught. It's important to understand what a no-no prompt is. No-no prompt is when you say, don't do that, don't hit, don't kick, don't jump. But using no-no prompts has also been scientifically shown to actually increase the frequency of behavior. Saying no kind of also fails to teach a new skill. Punishment can cause emotional responding. The learner can lash out in response, attack. With punishment, the learner can withdraw, stop paying attention, and not learn the lesson intended to be taught through punishment. And they also just, in general, lose learning opportunities. The learner may also engage in escape or avoidance behavior. When using punishment, we're modeling behavior. And I mean, how many of us end up punishing behavior, quote unquote, punishing behavior, while at the same time using the behavior that the child was using? Stop yelling. When we teach, it's important to remember we need to create a bond with our learner. We can't teach without that bond. And when we use punishment, this bond is lost. And so we lose that learner. Here's an example. Danny's dad gives him candy every time he starts to cry in order to get him to stop crying. So what happens after Danny's crying? He gets a candy. The outcome of crying in this scenario is being given candy. Do you think this behavior of crying will increase or decrease in the future? Exactly. It's going to increase. It's going to do it more. Giving Danny candy will reinforce crying. In this outcome, you think that dad is looking for crying in the long run? Probably not. Something that is a quick fix in the moment can sometimes cause more harm than good. Think long term instead of just in that moment. Here's another example. When Catherine wants to go for a walk with her ABA staff, she yells at the staff and until they take her for a walk. So what happens when Catherine yells at her staff? She's taken on a walk. The outcome of yelling in this scenario is being taken on a walk. But here comes a change. Catherine is given a new staff person, but they came in about a month ago. The new staff person doesn't take her on a walk when she's yelling. She ignores the yelling. The new staff person takes her on a walk when she says, "Let's go for a walk." What happens after Catherine yells at the new staff? She's ignored. So do you think that that yelling will increase or decrease in the future with this staff person? It is exactly, it's going to decrease. Yelling doesn't give her the outcome that she is looking for. So let's talk a little bit more about the example in the previous slide with Catherine and her new staff. When Catherine's new tech started working with her, the tech refused to give her attention or access to going on a walk when she yelled. Not just once in a while, but every single time she yelled. This refusal to reinforce problem behavior is called extinction. Extinction is defined as the discontinuation of reinforcement of a previously reinforced behavior. Extinction leads to a decrease in challenging behavior. Here's an example. Malou doesn't have soda. She puts money into the soda machine, and in the end, she still doesn't have soda. In the future, Malou will no longer put money in this machine because her behavior was not reinforced. So I'm sure you've been in a situation where you have put your foot down and said no to someone after previously telling them yes. Well, there are any parents out there. So what happens when you say no? Very likely being told no will evoke some pretty challenging behavior. Or am I right? Think about a child who watches TV after dinner every single night. But today, when they say, "Can I watch TV after dinner?" You tell them, "No, we don't watch TV after dinner anymore." What do you think this will look like? I could imagine a pretty big tantrum, can you? This is called an extinction burst, and an extinction burst is defined as an increase in the frequency or magnitude of responding when an extinction procedure is initially implemented. So again, Malou doesn't have soda. She puts money into that soda machine, and oh my gosh, she doesn't have soda. So what happens in this situation? We try pushing the button up a bunch of times, an increase in frequency. We try pushing the button even harder, so we put in an increase in magnitude. And then we try pushing or hitting the machine. So we have a differentiation also in our topography of our behavior. So why do we use extinction? If extinction causes extinction bursts, why in the world will we use it? Extinction wipes out challenging behavior. An extinction burst is temporary as long as the behavior continues to be put on extinction. So this is one of those times where you have to just put a little extra work into getting the end result you're looking for. How do you use extinction? Well, it's important to not make eye contact. So you want to ignore the child. So do not respond or keep talking. Don't react. You want to use a neutral expression. How many times do we want to stay neutral? But, when we check, our face is stuck in a grimace. Stay calm and collected and model that calmness. You want to show the child this is in a stressful situation. This is what we do. We stay calm. When ignoring, be very clear and very distinct. This is not the time to hug, hold hands, touch, squeeze the child. Leave the room if necessary and possible in regards to safety. Maybe if you have a camera going, you can keep an eye on them to make sure that they stay safe. When extinguishing behavior on one side, always consider if it's possible to teach a replacement behavior to meet the same need as the problem behavior. At the same time, we extinguish yelling at mom for a glass of soda. Could we teach asking calmly for water? Maybe we could teach the child to go and get the glass of water themselves. There are different variations on extinction or basically planned ignoring that we're using. We can ignore the child and the behavior. So this would be when we're dealing with relatively harmless behaviors that don't put anyone at risk, and that's important. Choosing to ignore the child and the behavior is the best and most effective option. So for example, this could be a tantrum for sweets, a child crying to gain attention. Another variation of planned ignoring would be ignoring the child, but not the behavior. And this would be when we deal with behaviors that put the child or the child or others at risk. And it's just no longer an option to ignore the behavior. So, for example, the child is hitting their head on the floor because he wanted a toy. Well, don't give them the toy. Use the physical guidance to block the behavior while socially ignoring the child. We can also ignore the child, but not the behavior. So this would be when we deal with, I'm sorry, um, uh, we could also ignore the behavior, but not the child, excuse me. And this would be when we deal with behaviors that are appropriate, but they're just happening too often. In this case, we can ignore the behavior while continuing to interact with the child. So for example, David is talking too much about Pokemon. Well, we can talk about our interests, we can talk about Pokemon, but when we reach that limit, you can continue talking to David, but ignore comments on Pokemon and redirect to another more appropriate topic. Some pro tips for extinction. Be aware that extinction may result in extinction bursts, like a variation in frequency, magnitude, or topography of behavior. Be aware that if you persist, the behavior will cease, and that's so important. When parents see extinction bursts, they may think that the intervention isn't working. However, an extinction burst is a sign that it is working. You found the function. That's it. Okay. Extinction is only meant to be used in places where you have more control. So don't start extinguishing if you won't have the time or patience to see it through until the end. If you see that you won't have time to see it through, stop right in the beginning. We don't want to have them cry for half an hour and then give them the M&Ms. That would just basically teach them if you want what you want, cry for half an hour. We risk teaching the learner that they only need to insist on their behavior and this will work to meet their needs. Extinction can be difficult for parents. It's important to have parents included in the training and have them on board. If they don't agree with extinction, that's fine. We could use differential reinforcement. It is slower, but it is a viable option, and we're going to be talking about that later in this module. Why would we use extinction? Extinction is more effective and long-lasting at extinguishing behavior, and it also doesn't have those disadvantages that punishment has. Let's look at an example. Billy cries for attention. Every time he wants someone to talk to him, he starts crying. Is crying an appropriate way to ask for attention? It's likely that when Billy cries, it makes people around him feel uncomfortable and annoyed. So it's important for Billy to learn to access attention in a more socially acceptable way in order for him to have a meaningful relationship with others. So if we put crying on extinction and teach Billy conversation starters, he'll get the attention he is looking for in a more socially acceptable way, increasing the likelihood of his peers and staff wanting to have conversations with him. So there are times when a behavior might be put on extinction in one environment, but nothing changes in another environment. So it continues to be reinforced there. This sometimes happens between ABA and school, at home. So this causes the behavior to worsen in the other environment where it's still being reinforced. This phenomenon is called a behavioral contrast. The best way for this to be avoided is to have everyone working together to use extinction across all parents, staff, environments. We're referring back to Catherine and her staff who put yelling on extinction. It is possible that when Catherine leaves ABA and goes to school, she will yell longer or more often to go for a walk if they continue to reinforce that behavior. So we could see her behavior worsen in those other environments if we don't have everyone on board doing the same thing. Okay. Spontaneous recovery is a behavioral effect associated with extinction in which the behavior suddenly begins to occur after its frequency has decreased to its pre-reinforced levels or stopped entirely. This is something that's important to be aware of. Once a behavior is extinguished using extinction, it's likely to occasionally the behavior might pop back up. When this happens, it's very short in duration and intensity as long as the challenging behavior continues to be put on extinction, which is so important. So you can basically think about it as that person kind of testing, where a form of challenging behavior used to work. It makes sense that every once in a while, the person might try to just test again and see if it'll work. That's why it's so important that we know the history of the person being served. Without being aware that a certain behavior was put on extinction, you could accidentally reinforce a behavior during spontaneous recovery. There are some situations where extinction just isn't an option. This might happen because family or caregivers aren't comfortable. It might violate rights, or it might just be unsafe for that individual. Sometimes extinction bursts can be difficult for family or caregivers of the person served to see. So, for example, if a person served engages in property destruction when they are unable to go on an outing, and they have been able to engage in property destruction before to get access that outing, when the outcome changes and the property destruction is no longer effective, the property destruction may temporarily escalate. So parents or family may not be willing to witness the escalated property destruction or may not want to see anything else be broken, which I think is fair. Sometimes if extinction were employed, it would violate the rights of the person served. So, for example, if Jane swears at her staff when asking for a sandwich, and swearing has been effective in obtaining a sandwich in the past, a way to change the swearing at staff would be to make sandwiches unavailable when swearing is happening, right? The problem here is that Jane has a right to access food, and staff denying this to her would be a violation of her rights. Sometimes professionals may even try to extinguish behaviors that the individual regularly sees others perform in the environment. So, for example, if Raphael regularly comes and sits on the couch and yells for his mother to turn on the TV, it would not make sense to intervene at all if Raphael's siblings did the same in front of Raphael. If the behavior is something that the learner is imitating because he sees others perform this action, and the behavior and reinforcement for others will not be addressed, this is not a behavior to target for extinction. Sometimes extinction is not a safe option for the person served. So, for example, if Janet engages in self-injurious behavior in order to get attention, and it has worked in the past, if it suddenly stops being effective, an extinction burst may happen. An extinction burst would increase the intensity of the self-injurious behavior, which would be unsafe for the person served. One option for making extinction more effective is using it using it together with other interventions. It's a great idea to explain the contingencies to the person served, if possible. Use extinction with a component of positive reinforcement. Include the family or other caregivers or professionals. Recognize and reinforce positive behaviors. There are a lot of possible interventions that can be effective in changing behavior. Sometimes it's helpful to put more than one in place at a time. However, this can make it really difficult to tell which is the intervention that caused that behavior change. Karen is working on increasing her participation in class. Karen's teacher decided to start giving Karen a token each time she raised her hand and participated in class. At the same time, the teacher begins a class-wide intervention. For every student who participates in class, a marble is added to the class marble jar, and once the jar is filled, the class can have a party. Karen's participation in class increases when these two contingencies are implemented. The only problem is it's so impossible to tell which contingency increased her participation, the token system or the class marble jar. When we make changes to a behavioral program one at a time, we're more likely to discover what the real cause of the behavior change is. Here are some general proactive strategies. Let's make sure we speak to individuals with respect. We also want to speak about individuals with respect. Avoid debriefing with other staff within earshot. You can also offer choices, even if you think you know what the individual will choose. These can be open or close-ended questions. Keep the learner busy and engaged in preferred activities as much as possible. And some general proactive strategies depending on those four functions of behavior. With avoidance or escape behavior, you might want to use priming, tell them beforehand what's going on, give them choices, use positive reinforcement or tokens. You can also use functional communication training, teach them to ask for breaks, build tolerance. With access-related behaviors, you want to teach learners to identify when the item or activity is available. It's snack time. You can ask for some toast now if you want. We also want to use functional communication training to make sure they're asking for items or activities instead of using problem behavior to obtain them. And we want to use the item as a reinforcer for other behavior when possible. When it comes to attention function behaviors, we want to provide positive attention frequently and make it clear that good behavior results in quality attention. With self-stimulatory behaviors, if you know the certain items that trigger the behavior, you want to integrate activities that are incompatible with the behavior. So if you see a lot of hand flapping, you might want to give them a poppet so they can't press the little buttons on the poppet when they are flapping their hands at the same time. They can only do one at a time. With reactive plans, and what I mean by reactive plans is strategies we put in place when the behavior has begun. It's important to remember that maintaining function and do not provide it. This is so key. With avoidance or escape behaviors, we want to follow through with a task. Maybe you could reduce the demand a little bit. You could provide breaks, have them finish the task between breaks by the end of session. But basically, you don't want to take away that activity the moment they engage in the problem behavior. You want to show them that we're going to finish it and then we get a break, even if it's just part of the activity at that moment. With access, we don't give it to them. If they're kicking us to get Cheerios or whatever it is, only give it to them when appropriate behavior is occurring and the item is available for them. With attention-related behaviors, we're going to withhold attention for problem behavior, even scolding or verbal corrections, and this is so important. Don't use scolding or verbal corrections as a behavioral strategy. It's not effective. These can be enough attention to maintain a problem behavior sometimes. So keep your cool and don't verbally engage until appropriate behavior is happening. With self-stimulatory behavior, you want to redirect to an appropriate behavior that is incompatible with the self-stimulatory behavior. So for example, somebody who likes to hold items right in front of their eyes cannot do so if they are playing in the sand. There are a number of behavioral replacement strategies. We can also decrease problem behavior by using reinforcement of the absence of problem behavior, reinforcing alternative behavior, and reinforcing low rates of behavior. So what is a replacement behavior? A replacement behavior is a behavior that is to be engaged in the place of an unwanted target behavior. So in order to find an appropriate replacement behavior, you need to determine the function of the target behavior. So this means you need to understand why the behavior is occurring. We're just going to kind of review those four different functions of behavior on the next page here. Again, there are four functions of behavior. We have sensory stimulation or automatic. We have escape, maintain behavior, attention, maintain behavior, and access, maintain behavior. What does access do? You kick someone to get those Cheerios. This provides desired activities or items. When does it happen? It happens when an item or an activity is desired or sought after. What do we do when we see access behavior? We offer a bridge activity. We improve access in general, not provided after the problem behavior, of course, but in other moments. Or we use, as we're going to discuss later in this module, we use differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors or differential reinforcement of other behaviors, DRA or DRO. With attention maintained behaviors, what is an attention maintained behavior? This provides awareness to or from people or interaction. So you engage in talking out in class, so people will pay attention to you. When does it happen? When seeking social interactions or inclusion. What do you do with this? You encourage positive actions with praise or attention beforehand. So you try to give that attention in other moments so they don't need to seek it through problem behavior. With escape maintained behavior, this eliminates unwanted actions, social interactions, or circumstances. Basically, it's a kid who kicks you to run away from the table so he doesn't have to do activities. When does it happen? When the task is not engaging, overwhelming, or something that they would just rather avoid. Makes sense, right? What do you do when you see this? You use a before then. So you explain first activity, then first we're gonna put together this puzzle, then we can watch a video on my tablet. We can use prompts. So these are basically hints to help them provide an answer. We can also give options or adjust the task duration. Let's do 10 minutes is a lot right now. Let's just do 5 minutes. With sensory stimulation related behaviors, this happens because it activates the brain's pleasure centers. It happens when well, it can happen almost any time. It's not related to the antecedent that we physically see in the environment. It is a private event that we cannot always have, we don't always have access to. So it can happen anytime, especially when the individual might be anxious or excited. What do we do when we see these self-stimulatory behaviors? We teach calming strategies and guide towards healthier actions. So we can use these functions to help aid in deciding which replacement behaviors to teach or implement. Okay, what are the 4 functions of behavior? The 4 functions of behavior are self-stimulatory, again, just to recap, which provides stimulation to the pleasure zone of the brain, attention, which provides access or awareness to or from people or interactions, escape, which removes undesired activities, interactions, or situations, or access, which provides preferred items or activities. We can use these functions to help aid in deciding which replacement behaviors to teach or implement. Okay. So, what about replacement behaviors for sensory stimulation? With sensory behaviors, the person served may find pleasure in the behavior. Sensory behaviors might also be the alleviation of pain. So, for example, if Joan has a headache, she might rub her temples. If John's feet ache, he might rub them after he takes his shoes off. Often, if a replacement behavior is needed, it's important to find a replacement behavior that will result in a similar sensory outcome for the person. So, for example, if a person you're serving plucks out their eyelashes, provide them with an object that has a similar feel and can be plucked at instead of their eyelashes. When a person served is looking for escape, many problem behaviors can quickly escalate. It's important to teach functional communication. Teach them to ask for a break. Functional communication refers to the most basic communication skill, meeting the needs of the person served so that they can communicate what they want or don't want, if they're hurt, etc. So if Jack smacks himself in the head because of tooth pain, the replacement behavior would be for Jack to say to staff, "My tooth hurts," so staff can assist him with that tooth pain. With attention-related behaviors, ignoring problem behaviors that are maintained by attention while paying extra attention to replacement of other appropriate behaviors, such as asking to do an activity, asking for attention, getting along well with others, etc. These would be great strategies. For behaviors maintained by attention, often Negative attention is just as reinforcing, if not more so, than positive attention. So, because of this, many problem behaviors can quickly escalate since we are all more likely to pay attention to problem behaviors. So, let's make sure that doesn't happen. Often people engage in problem behavior in order to have access to something tangible like food, treats, TV, iPad, etc. Replacing the problem behavior with appropriate behavior to obtain the tangible can prevent this. So, for example, if the person you're serving screams and cries and this results in access to the calming corner in an area in the clinic with stuffed animals, a TV, sensory toys to enjoy, well, instead of rewarding that problem behavior with access to these items, why don't we replace the problem behavior with asking appropriately to spend time in the calming corner? We have been focusing in the last few modules on skill acquisition, and replacement behaviors are a way that this can be used. Often the people we served are engaging in challenging behaviors because they don't have an appropriate alternative way of meeting their needs. You can identify the function, find an appropriate replacement behavior, and use skill acquisition to teach the replacement behavior to the person you're serving. Differential reinforcement refers to the provision of reinforcement for one behavior in a certain situation while providing a differential consequence for a different behavior in this situation with the problem behavior. We're going to be looking at 4 of these procedures here. We have DRA, which is differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors, DRI, which is differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors, DRO, or differential reinforcement of other behaviors, and DRL, differential reinforcement of low rates of behavior. DRA, or differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, refers to the differential reinforcement of an alternative but functionally equivalent behavior. This basically means that we're looking to withhold reinforcement for a maladaptive behavior while reinforcing an adaptive behavior that meets that same need. So if Andy has been hitting his mom to gain access to his tablet, with DRA, he'll no longer be given that tablet when he hits. He'll be given a tablet only when he asks for it. Here's another example. When Manuel watches TV, he kicks anyone who talks to him while his program is on. The function of this behavior is escape. We need a replacement behavior that allows him to escape the aversive stimuli of another person talking to him during this program. Calmly requesting is a replacement behavior because it serves the same purpose as kicking. When he requests for others to be quiet, they will be quiet and reinforce this request. When he kicks, he'll be prompted to make a calm request. DRI, or differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior, is the reinforcement of a functionally equivalent but incompatible behavior. If a replacement behavior is incompatible with the target behavior, then the person served cannot be able to engage in both simultaneously. Incompatible here means that the individual cannot physically perform the 2 behaviors at the same time, and this can be an effective way to lower the instances of challenging behavior. So, for example, Maggie is nonverbal. She slaps her face when she wants staff attention. Staff teach her to clap her hands when she wants attention. Clapping hands is a replacement behavior because it serves the same purpose as the face slapping. Maggie can't slap her face and clap her hands at the same time, so this is an incompatible behavior. Clapping hands will now be reinforced, and a response block, or just holding her hands so she can't do that, or extinction and error correction will be used when she slaps her face. DRO, or differential reinforcement of other behavior, is a reinforcement of the absence of problem behavior for a certain period of time. This means that the individual can be doing anything aside from the target behavior and receive a reinforcer, such as a token. Reinforcing the absence of problem behavior is a great strategy for busy staff. You can also use a token system here. What would DRO look like? Remember, we're going to need a timer for this. You could set a duration of time which you would anticipate your individual would be successful with. As long as they do not engage in the target response, they'll earn a token or some other reinforcer. The token reward, it rewards the suppression of the target behavior. If the target behavior occurs, you can reset the timer and give them another chance to turn things around and earn a token. For example, Dylan often engages in tantrums when he's at the mall with his parents when he sees something that he wants and he cannot have it. His staff will give him a token for each 5 minutes he can stay green or basically not engage in tantrums during these 5 minutes. And at the end of his 15-minute trip to the mall, he can earn a Kinder Egg. Differential reinforcement of low rates of behavior can be used when a behavior is only a problem because it simply occurs too often or rapidly. Reinforcing low rates of responding involves a clear criteria for how the behavior will happen and how often the behavior will happen, and reinforcing when this criteria is met. So, for example, Anna taps her tech on the shoulder and asks him how he's doing 20 to 30 times a day. It is appropriate a few times, but it's just happening far too often. The tech tells Anne that she can ask how he's doing just 3 times a day and that she can earn 10 bonus tokens if she does so. Thomas stuffs his mouth with food. He could earn a token for every 30-second interval with only 1 bite of food. Let's do a review of Module 3. So please get out your worksheet to answer these questions. Again, if you need to pause the video, if you need more time, please feel free to do so. I gave many examples here. Could you just provide 3 drawbacks of punishment? Module 3, question 2. Describe extinction in your own words. Question 3, what is an extinction burst? Question 4, true or false? Behavior is affected by what comes after it. Question 5, Jane's mom gives her a piece of candy each time she says please or thank you. Jane's mom adds marbles to a jar when either Jane or her brother says please or thank you. Jane's rate of using please and thank you increases. Which contingency made this happen? Question 6. What is a replacement behavior? Question 7. Which is an incompatible behavior for hand biting? That's it. You have completed Module 3. There are references. Thank you so much for your attention.